Welcome to Crown TV. Immerse yourself with a captivating audio from our stories. We provide an alternative way to read books in audio. We upload many audiobooks as possible, from bestsellers to timeless classic. Subscribe and stay tuned for new upload.
Episode 236, A Trip into Town. A few days later, David and Leona's wedding day finally arrived. But Alex still did not know that Leona would be the bride that day. As far as he knew, it was Lindsay and David who would be wed. After breakfast on that day, Alex gathered the Moon Girls around him. "There's a big wedding in town today," he said. "It could be a lot of fun. You should go and have a look." Alex felt bad for the girls. They had hardly left the house since they moved in, and they only had each other for company. He had asked them to go out and have fun many times, but they had been afraid to fail in their duties. They were always close by. Celeste was always there watching the other three. Celeste brought him a cup of hot tea and said, "Serving you is the best thing we can ask for, Mr. Alex." Celine nodded and smiled sweetly. Alex was touched. "You're so kind to me. Is it because of what happened to Georgina?" All four of them shook their heads. Celeste said, "At the beginning, it might have been because of what happened to our old master, and because you're our new one. But you've been very kind to us, and we like doing things for you." Celine also spoke up. "Mr. Alex, you've been so good to us. You're not only our Lord, but you care about us. You let us rest and go to bed early every night. You're so considerate. And we want to do what we can to pay you back. It makes us feel less guilty." Callisto and Luna nodded in agreement. Alex felt very grateful. "You've been truly kind to me, girls. I'll never forget it." The girls all blushed. Celeste leaned forward slightly and whispered, "Mr. Alex, there's still a way we could go. We've talked about it. As long as we're around you and see that you're happy, it doesn't matter where we are." Celine, Callisto, and Luna nodded. Alex didn't know what to say, but he felt very happy. He knew what Celeste was trying to say. He clapped his hands and stood up. "Girls, today I'll take you to play in the city. Get ready." The girls were excited, and they ran to their rooms to prepare themselves for a day in town. When they were gone, Alex took out his phone. He had been expecting a wedding invitation from Lindsay, but he hadn't heard from her. "But today's her wedding day," he thought. "Even if she doesn't want me there, I should at least call and congratulate her." At that same moment, Lindsay was in her sister's room. She was standing in front of Leona, who sat on the bed in a wedding dress. Because she was overcome with pre-wedding jitters, she had asked her sister to come and talk to her. "Leona, please remember how you're feeling today," Lindsay said and took Leona's hand. "Then when I get married, I'll be prepared for what it's like." Leona smiled. She felt a little less nervous. Just then, Lindsay's phone rang. It was Alex calling. Lindsay and Leona gave each other a look, and then she answered. "Hey, Lindsay. Congratulations on your wedding today. I can't come, so I wanted to call and congratulate you." "What do I do?" Lindsay asked herself. "Should I tell him that it's Leona who's getting married and not me?" Leona could sense what Lindsay was thinking, and she took her sister's hand and shook her head. She knew that if Lindsay told Alex that she was the one getting married, he might do something stupid. Lindsay calmed down. "Thanks, Alex. I'm sorry I didn't invite you. I hope you're not angry." No, of course not. I only want you to be happy. Well, I'm sure you're busy, so I'll let you get back to it. Bye. With that, Alex hung up the phone. Goodbye, Lindsay said. But Alex was already gone. She suddenly felt very guilty. Leona saw it on her face and decided to comfort her. It's okay, Lindsay. You know I don't like him. If you'd told him, he could have done something stupid. Once I marry David, maybe he'll finally get that I'm not his girlfriend, Debbie. You're protecting him. But Lindsay tried to protest, but she couldn't finish. She was still feeling so guilty that she didn't know what to say. Listen, today's my wedding day, Leona said. If you're not happy, then I won't be either. Just listen to me and smile, okay? But Lindsay was still unhappy, and she could only make the faint trace of a smile. Leona saw this and tried to encourage her. There you go. Isn't everything better when you're smiling? Leona turned to her bedside table and took out the beautiful jade pendant. She handed it to Lindsay. Lindsay, please take this and have it on you at the ceremony. Lindsay was surprised. But Dad said that it must always stay in your room. You should put it back. Leona shook her head. It's important to me. Marriage is a big event in life, and I want it there when I get married. Besides, I'll take it with me anyway when I go to live with David. Lindsay, please hold it for me. If you don't, I'll feel like my wedding is missing something. Lindsay didn't know what to do. Their father had once told her that her sister's pendant must be hidden from anyone outside the family. But the way Leona was looking at her, she couldn't refuse. All right, she said. I'll take it with me. After Alex had hung up the phone and the girls had gotten ready, they left the house and took a taxi to the center of Washington, D.C. The taxi dropped them off on a busy street where there were many tourists. Alex could tell that many of the men on the street were looking at him enviously. One young man in particular was staring at Alex and the girls while walking down the street and eating a sandwich. He was so preoccupied that he walked right into a lamppost and smeared sandwich dressing all over himself. The girl saw this and started giggling. Alex was glad to see that they were enjoying themselves. When they had been walking around for about 30 minutes, Celeste and Celine went to get them all something to eat. Alex sat down on the sidewalk, and Callista and Luna knelt and started rubbing his shoulders. Alex was a little uncomfortable with this, and he said to them, Don't worry about me. You should also sit down and rest a little. Callisto and Luna smiled at him, and Callisto said, Mr. Alex, you've been out walking with us for such a long time. You're sweating and you must be tired. Let us give you a little massage. You don't need to give me massages out in the open, Alex protested. It makes me uncomfortable. There's nothing wrong with it, Callisto responded. Just sit still and relax for a few minutes, and you'll be as good as new. While she was talking, Celeste and Celine came back with hamburgers and a bottle of soda. Alex took a hamburger and a bottle of Coke, and then he told the girls to also sit down and eat. He was worried that they might leave all the food for him, but they all took a hamburger and sat down to eat. Suddenly, Alex noticed that well over 10 men had gathered around him. They were staring at him and murmuring about this lucky guy who was out by himself with 4 beautiful girls. Their words made Alex even more uncomfortable than he already was. But the 4 girls were enjoying their food and hadn't noticed what was happening around them. The whole thing was so surreal that Alex couldn't help but laugh. They finished their meal under the watchful eyes of the crowd, and then they went back to wandering the streets. After a little while, they found themselves in a much bigger crowd. But these people were not focused on Alex. Instead, they were watching something that was happening further down the street. Suddenly, someone in the crowd exclaimed, "The wedding car is coming!" Several cars came driving slowly down from the far end of the street. Most of them were black Porsches of the same model, which were positioned in the front and back of the motorcade. In the center was the main car of the bride and groom. It was a white Rolls-Royce decorated with heart-shaped flowers. The whole crowd took out their phones and started taking pictures. Alex and the girls were standing at the back of the crowd. He tried to get a good look at the wedding car, but he could not see what was happening inside it. At one point, he caught a glimpse of David, but he could not see his bride. The whole thing was over in only a few minutes, and the crowd stood buzzing with excitement after the cars passed. The wedding party's schedule was common knowledge. "They'll drive to David Drake's house now," Alex heard one girl saying. "The ceremony will be held there at 12. I'm going over there. Does anyone want to come?" Many people seemed to be having similar thoughts, and the crowd started dispersing. Alex could tell that the girls were all itching to go. "If you want to go, I'll take you," he said to them. "I actually know the bride. She's a friend of mine." The girls were very excited, and Celeste said, "Thank you, Mr. Alex. We've never been to a wedding like this. We really want to see it." Alex shook his head slightly. He hoped that he was treating the girls well, but they seemed overly happy with everything he did or said. He couldn't tell if they were really pleased or just trying to please him. Just when they were about to leave for David's house, his phone rang. He recognized the number. It was someone from his family, but he couldn't remember who. Who could it be? He hesitated for a moment, and then he answered the phone. "Alex, hey, you haven't forgotten your favorite cousin, have you?" said the voice on the other end. It was the voice of a handsome and intelligent young man, clear and full of confidence. Episode 237, A Rivalry Rekindled. Alex's heart stirred. He knew exactly to whom the voice on the other end of the phone belonged. Suddenly, he was filled with memories of his cousin Nathan. Nathan was the eldest son of Alex's aunt and uncle. When they were children, Nathan had always been competitive with Alex. Whether it was homework, strength, running speed, or even height or weight, everything was always a competition with Nathan. Once, their grandfather Lincoln had wanted to see their martial arts skills. Nathan had been so excited to impress his grandfather, but Alex had bested him easily. But another memory was even stronger. When Alex was 7 years old, he had stayed with his aunt and uncle while his parents had gone overseas for an extended work trip. Soon after his parents had left, Alex had been sitting by himself on the swing in the yard. He remembered he had been feeling lonely, and then he had suddenly been pushed forward head first into the ground. The impact had hurt his head badly, but then he had stood up and seen Nathan laughing at him. He had rushed at Nathan in anger and tried to wrestle him to the ground. Meanwhile, Nathan had shouted terrible things about how Alex's family did not love him and how he was all alone in the world. At that point, Alex had been burning with rage and his strength had increased. Unable to control himself, he had struck Nathan in the head repeatedly. In the end, he had beaten Nathan badly. Alex's aunt and uncle had told his grandfather, and he had been forced to go without food or company for days. 7 years ago, when it was time for their poverty training, Alex and Nathan were sent out to experience the world at the same time. Alex had almost forgotten him. He had not seen him nor thought about him for 7 years. But now that he heard his cocky voice again, that same anger from all those years ago came flowing back. He frowned and answered coldly, "What do you want?" "I can't tell you over the phone," Nathan answered. "Meet me at the Continental Hotel. I'll be in room V001. And hurry up. I have news. Grandpa sent me." He hung up the phone. Did Grandpa send him? Alex wasn't sure what to think. If Nathan just wanted to talk, I wouldn't go. But if it's Grandpa's idea, that's different. "Mr. Alex, are you all right?" Celeste asked softly. He had completely forgotten about the girls. "I'm okay, but something's come up. I need to take care of something. You go to the Drake house. When I'm done, I'll come find you." "We'll go with you," said Celeste. The other 3 girls were already getting into a taxi. Alex looked at them and smiled. "I have to go alone. You really don't need to be there." The girls could tell that Alex didn't want them to come with him, and none of them chose to put up a fight. "All right," said Celeste. "But please come back and find us as soon as you can." Alex agreed, and the girls waved to him as they reluctantly got in the taxi and left. Alex got his taxi and went to the Continental Hotel. Just a few short days ago, he had been at the banquet of the Sultan of Brunei. On that day, he had almost felt superior to everyone else there. The staff at the Continental had all witnessed it. He wondered if they remembered him. When he entered the hotel, every staff member who saw him greeted him with enormous smiles and extreme deference. The attention they paid him made Alex uncomfortable. The hotel manager showed him to room V001. It was the best dining hall in the hotel. Alex opened the door and walked inside. The dining table in the middle of the room was filled with plates of food. A young man in a black jacket was sitting by the table and eating. He had a relaxed and casual look, and his facial features reminded Alex of himself. It was Nathan. Behind him stood a man who looked to be over 60 years old. Alex recognized him. His name was Keith Manson, and he was a skilled bodyguard who worked for the Ambrose family. Nathan saw Alex enter the room and grinned at him. "Hey, Alex! So good to see you again after all these years." Since Nathan was well-dressed and accompanied by a bodyguard, Alex thought that he might have passed the poverty training and returned to the family. He was not in the mood for chit-chat. "Hi, why did Grandpa ask you to come see me?" Nathan put his fork down, leaned back in his chair, and smiled. "What's the rush? We haven't seen each other for 7 years. We should talk about the poverty training. Who had it worse, do you think? I was dumped in an orphanage. From junior high school to university, not a single girl wanted anything to do with me. Too handsome, I guess." "I'm not interested," Alex said and stared impatiently at Nathan. "I just want to know why you're here." While Nathan had been talking, Alex's childhood impression of him had come back with increased clarity. He had always been a scoundrel who would do anything to get what he wanted. "Fine, so I guess you don't want to talk. Whatever. My parents don't even remember you, and I don't much care. I'm only here because Grandpa asked me to come. It's about your place in the family." Alex could barely hide his anticipation of what his grandfather's news might be. "Am I back in?" Before Nathan could answer, the door opened again, and two men came into the room. When Alex turned around, he saw that they were Ken Stokes and Sam Woodsworth. "Ken! Sam! It's you!" he blurted out. "Hello, Alex," Ken responded. They were both happy to see him. However, Nathan did not seem pleased at all. He rose from his chair, strode with determined steps across the room over to Ken and Sam, and gave them each a hard slap across the face. "What are you doing?" Alex shouted. He had raised his hand to strike Nathan, but Ken and Sam quickly restrained him. At first, Alex didn't understand what they were doing, but it soon became clear to him. Ken and Sam saw it as their responsibility to prevent fights between members of the family, and Alex had not yet been accepted back. Another incident could be very bad for him. Nathan glared at Ken and Sam. "I asked you to be here ages ago. Don't you take me seriously? And what's with being so nice to Alex? He's been disowned." "Sorry, Nathan," Ken responded. "We were held up in traffic. We meant no disrespect." Nathan slapped Ken across the face again. "Oh, there's an excuse. Do you think that makes it okay?" Ken bowed his head. "I couldn't say." "Ken, you're just the guy who runs the East Coast for us," Nathan said. "To the family, you're the help. You need to understand that." Then he turned to Sam and slapped him too. "That was to even the score. Ken got 2, and you've just had 1. Now you're even. No need to thank me." Sam was visibly angry, but he couldn't do anything. "Yes, thank you, Nathan." Throughout all this, Ken and Sam had held on to Alex, out of fear of what he would do to Nathan. However, Alex had grown so angry that they couldn't restrain him any longer. He broke free from their grips, grabbed Nathan by the collar and shouted, "How dare you treat Ken and Sam like this? They're family!" He was so angry that he couldn't control himself, and he struck Nathan in the face repeatedly. He felt as if the powers of Zora and Georgina were working through him. It was as if he had tapped into some great force inside himself. He had taken hold of him, and he struck Nathan almost a dozen times before he snapped out of it and let him go. Nathan wobbled and fell to the ground. Keith ran over and helped him up. His face was swollen and red. He closed his eyes and shook his head to compose himself. Then he pointed threateningly at Alex. "So, you'd beat your own family for the sake of the underlings. You're such a good little boy, Alex." "Shut up," Alex responded. "When I was in New York, Ken and Sam took good care of me. Sam even risked his life for me. They're more my family than you are." Ken and Sam were visibly moved. "That's rich coming from you," Nathan sneered. Alex was infuriated. "Stop giving me that stupid smile, or I'll beat it right off your face." Nathan was not afraid. He stared Alex right in the eyes and said, "Am I wrong? You abandoned your girlfriend, and now you come here to play the hero. It makes me sick." So that's what he's playing at, Ken thought, as he stared at the two young men. Since the last time he and Alex had met, Ken had looked into things. He now knew that Debbie Stonehill was Leona Marvel, and that Alex had continued to pursue her. Then, Nathan had told him that they were going to see Alex in Washington, D.C. Ken had thought that the family was welcoming Alex back, since he didn't seem to know or mind Leona getting married. He thought that they were there to bring Alex the good news. But Nathan had mentioned Debbie, and his intentions were now clear. He wanted to rekindle Alex's affection for Leona so that he would go back to chasing her. If that happened, his family would keep rejecting him. Oh, Alex, Ken thought. Please don't be fooled. Episode 238, The Girl or the Money. Stay out of my business, Alex said. You're pathetic, Nathan answered scornfully. Some little girl was nice to you because you saved her, and then she left because she realized you'd be bad for her. And on top of that, you stole a bunch of money from her, dropped out of school, and went to work in a hotel to pay it back. Nathan had done his homework. It was clear that he wanted to make Alex feel guilty. Don't talk about me and her, Alex shouted. Excited, are we? Well, you should be. I've heard things, about how you treated your girlfriend. For example, I heard that when Debbie went to that competition in Chicago, she was the only one whose boyfriend wasn't with her. Poor girl, all alone. And where were you? Off drinking somewhere? I bet you were having the time of your life. Now, here's the question, Alex. If you treat your girlfriend like that, would you really care about a couple of employees? Just drop the act. Alex was shaken. Nathan sneered. Just admit that you're a hypocrite, Alex. I'm not, Alex blurted out. I love her, and I'll make things right. And how will you do that? Nathan answered coldly. Who are you kidding? She's getting married today, and you want to make up with her? Do you want to be a homewrecker? Alex was startled. What? She's getting married? Spare me, Alex, as if you don't already know that Leona's marrying David Drake today. You're wrong. David's marrying her sister Lindsay. Nathan hesitated for a moment. You really don't know, do you? Then listen up. David isn't marrying Lindsay. He's marrying Leona, your precious girlfriend. Alex froze. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Nathan continued. Oh, and by the way, Grandpa did ask me to come here. He wants you to know that if you've really given up on Leona, you're not cut off anymore, and you can come to his birthday party in a few days. But if you persist, you're on your own. He stopped talking and stared at Alex. Make your choice. As much as he hated Nathan, Alex knew that he was telling the truth. He had come to D.C. on Grandpa's orders. Alex searched desperately for an answer and blurted out, I can't give up. Sam stepped forward to interrupt him. Alex, please, think carefully. If you reject your grandfather now, you'll be out in the cold for a long time. Ken also stepped up. This is your chance, Alex. If you accept, everyone has been told they're allowed to come and see you. You'll be back in. Please think about it. Nathan exploded in anger. Don't interrupt, you idiots. The family's talking. He walked over and kicked them both in the shins, and they stumbled to the ground. They looked at Alex, and their eyes seemed to beg him to make the right choice. Alex didn't know what to do. Nathan looked at his watch and said leisurely, "It's just over 11 now, and Leona marries David at 12. You'd better hurry." No, Alex thought. If Leona marries someone else, I don't want to live. He turned to Sam and Ken. Sam, Ken, I know you're looking out for me, but Debbie means more than anything. I can't let her do this. I hope you understand. And with that, he ran out of the room and didn't look back. Ken and Sam were saddened, but they understood why Alex had made this choice. When Nathan saw the sadness in their eyes, he grew enraged once again. You idiots! As if your opinions would change his mind. I'll tell you, if I were in charge, you'd be fired. Now get out of here. Ken and Sam looked resentfully at Nathan, stood up and left the room. Nathan and Keith were now alone. Keith stepped forward. Well done. You played this perfectly. Nathan touched his face and squinted at Keith. Did I? Keith nodded. Beating Ken and Sam got him worked up. Once he revealed the news about Leona getting married, he was too emotional to think straight. It was well done. I'm impressed. Nathan sneered. You're impressed? I didn't plan that. All I had to do was tell him that Leona was getting married. I suffered a beating for nothing. Keith searched for a compliment to smooth things over. You have good instincts for this. You know him better than I do. Yeah, well, we're family, Nathan said. Of course I know him. If he cares about someone, he'll sacrifice anything for them. It's an easy weakness to exploit. By the way, boss, I have some good news, Keith said. Apparently, the Drake family has increased their security for the wedding. They've hired a bunch of new guys, and one of them is a real force of nature. He's the best hand-to-hand fighter in the business. If Alex tries anything, those boys will straighten him out. Is that so? Nathan said. As much as he had looked into the situation with Leona, he did not know about this. Keith lowered his voice and continued. He suddenly seemed hesitant. It's true. But you know, if something terrible happens to Alex at this wedding, your grandfather might blame us. Nathan smiled. We'd better make sure something happens to him. And if my grandfather blames anyone, it'll be the Drakes. You're right, Keith said. There's no way to pin it on us. He took a step forward and suddenly noticed the swelling in Nathan's face. Boss, your face. Let me take you to the hospital. No, Nathan answered. My dear cousin is getting killed, and I'll be there to see it. Alex ran out of the hotel, but he couldn't find a taxi. He saw a man getting out of a car, and he ran up to him and took the keys out of his hand. Then he got in the car, slammed the door shut, and raced off to David's house. It's over 11 now, Alex thought. They'll be married in less than half an hour. There's no time to lose. Over at David's house, a large crowd was gathering out front. The Moon Maidens were among them. They were curious and excited to see their first big wedding. The Washington, D.C. Police Department had sent almost 30 police officers to keep order in front of the house. They were led by Police Commissioner Billings. They had put up police tape to keep onlookers off the street, so that the wedding would not be interrupted by the commotion of the crowd. At an intersection not far from the house, Nellie had parked her food truck. She was busy selling pancakes to the crowd. The sidewalk was overflowing with people, and Nellie had already made hundreds of dollars. When the wedding motorcade arrived in front of the villa, a lot of important people stepped out of the black cars. Many of them were members of the city's wealthiest families, and they were accompanied by artists and celebrities of all kinds. Most of the invited politicians had found it inconvenient to attend, and they had already visited David to express their congratulations in a less public manner. When all these people stepped out of the cars, the roaring of the crowd reached a fever pitch. Many people cried out for their idols to notice them, and hundreds of phones were buzzing in a picture-taking frenzy. David and Leona stepped out of the white wedding car and walked into the villa under the adoring gaze of the crowd. Once all the guests had gone inside, the buzz of the crowd started to die down. Nellie's food truck was still surrounded by customers. She was concentrating on making pancakes when she suddenly heard the roar of a fast-approaching car. She looked up to find out what was happening. 100 meters down the street, a BMW came racing straight towards the food truck at breakneck speed. It closed the distance in the blink of an eye, and everyone around the food truck was frightened as it roared right past them. Strange, Nellie thought. That was Alex driving that car. But why would he be going to David's? But there was no time to think about it. She stepped out of the food truck and ran toward the house. Episode 239, Race Against Time. When Alex came racing into the front yard of the house, it caused a stir among the crowd and the policemen. He didn't pay any attention to them. He drove right up to the front of the house and ran straight for the door. A dozen policemen came running at him from all directions. As he reached the front porch, he was surrounded. Commissioner Billings came walking up to him. "Mr. Ambrose, you can't go in now. There's a wedding going on." "He respects me," Alex thought with some relief. "He must remember what happened at the Tinsdale Hotel, and my relationship with the Queen of Brunei. If anyone else were on duty, there would be a fight." But he had no time to argue. "I'm going inside, Commissioner. Please, tell your men to step aside." Commissioner Billings frowned. "I'm here to ensure that the wedding goes smoothly, young man. Please don't make a scene." Alex could feel his time running out. He wanted to knock the police down and rush inside. Suddenly, a voice called out from behind him. "This boy was awarded the National Medal of Honor of Brunei just a few days ago, Commissioner. Are you trying to stir up an international dispute?" Alex looked behind him and saw that it was Nellie. She walked up to Alex, glared at him, and said, "Show it to him." Alex took out his medal and showed it to Commissioner Billings. Nellie smiled. "Commissioner, are you aware that receiving the National Medal of Honor makes you a nobleman of Brunei? If you try to stop Alex by force, who knows what the Sultan might think?" Commissioner Billings thought about his situation. By using police resources to provide security for David's wedding, he was already in danger of violating the law. The last thing he needed was an investigation into his activities. If Nellie was telling the truth, that was exactly what would happen. Besides, the commissioner thought, I've been told that many cities rich and powerful were there when Alex received the medal. They must know about its significance. If I let him pass, the Drakes couldn't protest. The commissioner looked around him at the crowd of officers who had gathered around them. "Let him pass," he barked. "Get back outside and maintain order." The officers dispersed. "Thank you," Alex said to Nellie. As he took his first step into the house, a voice cried out from inside. "Nobody's entering this house." A thin, middle-aged man in gray clothes came walking up the hallway toward Alex. This man was Ryder Dixon. He was one of the new fighters David had hired a few days earlier, after he beat 10 of his best men. He looked at Alex and said coldly, "Do you think you can just go inside? There are rules. Turn around and walk away, and I promise I won't hurt you." Right as he finished speaking, Alex could see the shadows of 4 people who came walking up behind him. It was the Moon Girls. "Nobody threatens Mr. Alex like that," said Celeste. The girls raised their hands and stepped toward Ryder. He took one step backwards and got into a defensive posture. The girls started taking jabs at him, and he was surprised by their fighting prowess. He almost looked a little scared. He managed to repel the first few strikes, but then Celeste struck him hard in the stomach. It took the wind right out of him, and he barely managed to dodge the next blow from Callisto. Seeing that he was getting disoriented, Celine took the opportunity to punch him in the chest. The boy sent him reeling and gasping for air. Before he could recover, he was hit repeatedly all over his body. "Apologize!" Celeste shouted, and the girls all punched him in the stomach at the same time. Ryder fell to his knees and threw up. Once their foe had been defeated, the girls looked back toward Alex. When they saw Nellie standing next to him, they raised their hands against her. They remembered that she had been Zora's maid. Nellie took a step back and made a defensive posture. "Don't!" Alex shouted. He stepped in between Nellie and the Moon Maidens to stop them from fighting. "The feud between Georgina and Zora had nothing to do with her. I have something really important to do, and I can't be watching over you. Do as I say or I'll be really angry." The girls looked puzzled and unhappy, but Alex made his will known. They wouldn't disobey him. Meanwhile, the people around them had been stunned by what they had witnessed. 4 young girls had gone up against a rough-looking security guard and bested him easily. It was like something out of a movie. Ryder Dixon was as mystified as any of them. He was still lying on the ground and looking up at the girls. He couldn't believe they had beaten him. Alex stepped over him to walk into the house. As he did so, another voice came booming through the hall. "Didn't you hear? You're not coming in." This time, a group of 7 people came walking up to the door. There were both men and women in this group, and they wore plain clothing. David had been busy recruiting the best fighters he could find, and now it seemed that everyone was on duty. This particular group was led by Damien North and Rick Veazey. Their task was to ensure that the wedding went smoothly. They'd been posted all over the mansion, but they all rushed to the front door when they heard that Ryder had been beaten. Alex could tell immediately that all of them were seasoned fighters. He had seen Damien and Rick at the closing ceremony of the Olympics, where one of them had gone up against 5 visiting athletes and won. They were no joke. Alex looked at his phone. It was 11:45. If I'm held up now, he thought, the ceremony will be done. His anger boiled over. "Get out of my way!" His voice echoed in the hallway like a thunderclap. The Moon Girls and Nellie almost covered their ears. They were all shocked at seeing Alex so angry. "Careful who you scream at, pal," Rick Vesey said calmly. The entire group of fighters rushed toward Alex, and Nellie and the girls stepped forward to defend him. When the groups collided, they split up into several smaller fights in the front yard. The Moon Girls took on one assailant each. Damien and Rick teamed up on Alex, and Nellie held her own against the last one. To Alex's surprise, she handled herself quite well. She only looked a little rusty compared to the Moon Maidens. The crowd of onlookers could not believe their eyes. Another, even bigger fight. The wedding was getting more exciting by the minute. Although he was fighting both Damien and Rick, Alex managed to avoid their blows. He was more skilled than they had thought he was. They thought they were unbeatable, but he was dodging all their blows and making them look foolish. Damien struck at Alex's stomach, but he only hit the air. As he dodged the blow, Alex grabbed Damien's wrist and twisted. It broke with a popping sound. Damien screamed and stumbled backwards. "All right, tough guy," Rick roared. "I'll finish you myself." He rushed toward Alex and went for his torso. He seemed to be trying to go plunge right through his chest, but he was barely able to touch him. Alex twisted and turned his body, and Rick's hands seemed to glide right over his clothes. Then Alex straightened his back and threw his whole body weight at Rick. Rick staggered back in a daze. "This is taking too long," Alex thought. "I don't have time for this." He turned away from Rick and ran for the house. He didn't get far. Damien suddenly grabbed his legs. "Rick!" he cried. "Get this punk!" "Hold him!" Rick answered as he came running. He struck Alex hard in the head. Damien's broken wrist hurt so badly that he had to let Alex go. He fell on his back and cried in agony. Looking at him, Alex couldn't understand how he could have been held back by a man with a broken wrist. Rick looked at Alex in horror. The blow to the head seemed to have done nothing. He didn't know whether to flee or fight. Alex wanted to run off into the house. Nobody was stopping him now. But he didn't want to leave the girls with Rick and Damien. Who knows what they might do, he thought. Rick's fear took hold of him, and he turned to run away. But before he could take more than a couple of steps, he was grabbed from behind by the collar. The grip was stronger than any he had felt before, and it pulled him to the ground with a loud thump. Episode 240, Marital Issues. Alex stood over Rick and glared at him. "So, you're running away? All right, fine. But your friend just had his arm broken. Maybe you'd like to share his pain before you go." Rick was shaking with fear. "Please don't hurt me. I can't stop you. You can just go inside." Alex was filled with contempt for Rick. He reached down, grabbed him by the collar again, and slammed his face into the dust. Then he grabbed his right arm with both hands and twisted it hard until it snapped. Alex left him there, rolling in the dirt and crying out in pain. The crowd of onlookers hardly dared to move, and many of them had snuck away to get away from Alex. The Moon Maidens had their opponents under control, but Nellie seemed to be struggling. Time is running out, Alex thought. "Celeste, help Nellie," he ordered. "We need to finish this." Celeste didn't stop fighting to answer him. "Yes, Mr. Alex. Don't worry. Go do what you had to do." Finally, with no one to stop him, Alex ran toward the house. The wedding ceremony was being held in the largest room of the villa. Chairs had been put out for all the guests, with an aisle in the middle, and in front of them stood David with the priest. David's parents and relatives were standing beside him. Charles Marvel came in through the doorway at the other end, leading Leona down the aisle. She was wearing a white wedding dress and shining high-heeled shoes, and everyone in the room thought how beautiful she was. When they reached the other end of the hall, her father handed her over to David. Leona lay her hand on his arm, and they smiled at each other and faced the priest. The priest cleared his throat to signal the beginning of the ceremony. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to celebrate the union of Mr. David Drake and Miss Leona Marvel in holy matrimony." The priest gave a short speech about the beauty of true love and the joys of married life, and then he addressed David and Leona directly. "David and Leona, by the power vested in me by the city of Washington, D.C., I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." David stared deeply into Leona's eyes and leaned forward to kiss her. But just before he could do it, a voice cried out from across the hall. "Don't you dare kiss her!" Alex cried as he came running through the doorway in the back. A loud and discontented murmur arose among the guests. Many of them remembered that Alex had lost them a huge investment opportunity with the Sultan of Brunei. "How the hell did he get in here?" David asked himself. "I have so many professionals guarding the house. What happened?" Daryl, who was sitting in the back with Miriam, snickered and rose to speak. "David, today's your wedding day. I'm sure Alex is just here to congratulate you. He's just another guest. Let him sit and watch." Colin was sitting close by. He understood that Daryl was torturing Alex and decided to join in. "Of course. Alex and Leona are classmates. It's only fair to give him a seat. Alex, would you like to bless the happy couple?" Jason, blinded as he was by his hatred of Alex, couldn't see the game his friends were playing. "A seat's too good for him. Just kick him out already." David had recovered from the initial shock. "Today's my wedding day, and you've broken into my house. You have about 3 seconds to leave, or I promise you'll regret it." The extra security he had hired had made David even cockier, especially once he saw Cliff Munson in action. He had felt that his new security team made him invincible. He had told Cliff specifically to watch out for Alex, but the man had only laughed. He had said that only a few people in the whole country could beat him in a fight, and Alex wasn't one of them. But as safe as David felt, he didn't want his wedding to be ruined. He wanted Alex removed, not beaten. He would make him pay later. Alex didn't pay any attention to David. His eyes were squarely on Leona, who was staring back at him with resentment in her eyes. The look she gave him made him nervous. "Perhaps I've made a mistake," he thought. "Leona, do you really want to marry him?" he asked, afraid of what the answer might be. David lost his patience. Mr. Munson, throw this trespasser out. We'll deal with him another time. Cliff rose from his seat in the back. From the way David had talked about him, everyone had assumed that Cliff was fearsome and intimidating. But the man who now came walking toward Alex was anything but scary. He was plump and middle-aged, and the wedding guests all assumed he was not who David had called for at all. They looked around for the real Cliff, but no one else came forward. Cliff stopped right in front of Alex and looked him in the eye. "Young man, this is a wedding. I don't like to ruin weddings. Let's go outside, and I'll let you choose your punishment. What do you say?" When he finished speaking, he raised his right leg and brought his foot down onto the floor with terrible force. The whole room trembled as if there had been an earthquake, and the floor tiles cracked in a circle around him. The wedding guests were shocked at the strength of this strange man. Every person in the room was dead silent, and they stared at him in awe. Alex was also taken aback. He knew that the man before him was not like the others in the front yard. He was far stronger than any of them. He tried to hide his trepidation. "One of your colleagues said something similar, and now he's lying in the dust outside with a broken arm. If you keep speaking to me like that, I'll do the same to you." "Fine," Cliff answered. He took a couple of steps back, bent his legs slightly, and suddenly threw himself at Alex like a battering ram. Everyone in the room was startled by his sudden move. Most of them had never seen a person move so quickly. Cliff's fist came flying straight at Alex's face, and the momentum of his whole body lay behind it. Alex was surprised at the speed and power of the man, but he was ready for him. He quickly raised his hand, grabbed Cliff by the wrist, and deflected the blow away from himself. Cliff was startled. He had expected to knock Alex out with one move to prove his worth in front of David and the wedding guests. Unfortunately for him, his opening move had been thwarted. He came back at Alex with a second punch to the chest, and he put all his strength into it. He was determined to beat Alex into submission. Once again, Alex decided to deflect his opponent's blow. He grabbed the wrist again and turned the punch downwards into the floor, and the punch made a second crater in the tiles. The pain of the impact made the man grimace, but he didn't allow himself to cry out. He stood back up and looked at his hand. The impact had opened several wounds on his knuckles, and blood came trickling onto the floor. While this was happening, the wedding guests had cleared out of the hall, afraid of getting hurt in this insane brawl. Alex and Cliff were now alone in the middle of the giant empty space. "I underestimated you, boy," Cliff said as he wiped the blood off on his jacket. It was clear from his expression that he still didn't think of Alex as an equal. "But you should know something," he continued. "I've got more tricks up my sleeve. Years of training. Don't think you've beaten me just because you're still standing." He shifted his posture, and Alex could tell that he was adjusting his center of gravity. His eyes looked sharper than they had before. "Let's see you dodge this." With that, Cliff lunged at Alex yet again. But this time was different. He was not just using brute force. He moved so fast that Alex almost imagined he had split into two. Before Alex could react, Cliff struck him from the side and hit him square in the chest. Alex stumbled backwards, and Cliff smiled triumphantly. Then he moved on him again, and the blows started raining down on Alex. Alex couldn't adapt to his opponent's change in fighting style, and he tried desperately to block the blows. No matter how he tried to shield himself, it seemed that Cliff could always find a way past his defenses. I have to think of something, he thought. But the man must have trained his whole life. I can't see any weak points in his technique. Alex could do nothing but withstand the assault as best he could. He stood like that for quite a while. But then it seemed as if the other man's blows were somehow strengthening him. He grew more and more focused, and he could feel his inner faculties gaining in power. I know the powers of Zora and Georgina are still within me, he thought. This man may be a skilled fighter, but he's nowhere near as good as they were. If only I can channel their strength, I'll beat him easily.
Thank you for listening to Crown TV. Please don't forget to subscribe, share and turn on the notification button.